but we will make do with what we have. There will be a recording of this particular event, but hopefully most of you can join in the discussion that we're about to have today. It's a very important discussion about the impact of Hurricane Melissa on the built heritage of Jamaica. So technically, we have a distinguished panel today, and one thing I would just note, many people have been speculating that I'm sweating because the panel is so distinguished, that I'm very nervous in the presence of such experienced, well-learned individuals. All right, so today we have 5 individuals, various interests, but all with a shared consensus on where they stand on the issues regarding Hurricane Melissa and its impact on our built heritage. So today we have, to my left, we have Dr. Patricia Green. So, Dr. Patricia Green, let me read her extensive bio. She's an architect and a historic preservationist, and she's well renowned as an international expert consultant on cultural heritage to the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, conducting global missions and periodic reporting exercises for Latin America and the Caribbean region. She's also involved in the UNESCO development of the World Heritage Strategy for Small Island Developing States, addressing places that are uniquely vulnerable and extremely susceptible to climate change and natural disasters. She uses history to show that traditional Caribbean architecture and its cultural landscapes evolved resilient adaptations against natural disasters across the centuries to mitigate the effects of earthquakes and hurricanes, meaning we still have a lot to learn. So Pat, as she likes to be called, is the only Jamaican architect included in the book 100 Women Architects in Practice, published in 2024 by the Royal Institute of British Architects. A peer reviewer and evaluator for scientific journals and international conferences, she has presented at international conferences, published in books, scientific journals, magazines, and newspaper op-eds. Dr. Green is frequently invited by the media to address sustainable development practices in the built and natural environments. I was exposed to her through all angles. So, former head of the Caribbean School of Architecture at the University of Technology, Jamaica, she promotes the Caribbean built and natural environment as foundations of sustainability and elaborates on decolonization that indigenous people had contact and African people imported under enslavement. And basically considering them as representative of the active legacy in terms of their contributions, linking the Americas, Africa, and Europe. So a round of applause for Dr. Green. Right, to her left, we have a representative from the GNHT. We actually have 2 representatives from the GNHT today, but starting with Mr. Blake. So Mr. Blake currently serves as Assistant Manager in the Estate Management Division of the GNHT, or the Jamaica National Heritage Trust. He has worked at the GNHT for about 15 years, providing technical services for the protection, maintenance, and development of heritage sites. Mr. Blake has a BSc in Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Technology. He briefly served as a junior planner before joining the GNHT in 2011. At the GNHT, he has worked in both the estate management and the heritage preservation and planning divisions. Notable projects include the rehabilitation of the monuments in the National Heroes Park, the Blue Lagoon Management Plan, the Falmouth Preservation Scheme, and the Port Royal World Heritage Nomination Dossier. Mr. Blake has served as a member of the GNHT's Heritage Development Review Committee and regularly represents the GNHT at the Municipal Corporation and the relevant stakeholder meetings. Mr. Blake is passionate about the protection and preservation of Jamaica's cultural heritage, particularly the island's diverse built heritage. Thank you, Mr. Blake. Right, so as the department's rep, we have Dr. Leslie Gale Atkinson Swaby, a lecturer and archaeologist in the Department of History and Archaeology on here at the Mono campus. Dr. Swaby has incorporated her passion for archaeology, history, heritage, and art history into a diversified and engaging career and academic pursuits. She has over 20 years' experience as an archaeologist, cultural resource manager, researcher, and educator. Dr. Atkinson Swaby has written and edited several publications on Caribbean archaeology and rock art. This includes serving as editor of The Earliest Inhabitants, The Dynamics of the Jamaican Taino, and co-editor of Rock Art of the Caribbean with Michelle H. Hayward and Michael A. Cinquino. In addition, she is the editor of the Journal of Caribbean Archaeology special volume on Jamaica, Yamaye, Jamaican Prehistory and Contact Period in 2022. Her passion project was the publication of her first children's book. Right, that one. A Taino Girl's First Adventure. Oh, so she also, is in touch with her Taino heritage as well. So Dr. Atkins Swebe is also dedicated to the promotion, protection, and appreciation of natural and cultural heritage resources and the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. Thank you, Dr. Swebe, for joining us today. Okay, so we do have someone who is very passionate about history and all its manifestations. We have Miss Marcia Elizabeth Thomas, right, a retired Foreign Service officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, with specialization in international trade and international relations. She is a very strong advocate of anything related to history. She's a long-standing member of the Built Heritage Jamaica and the Jamaica Historical Society. She identifies as Jamaican. So Ms. Thomas will be here representing the Built Heritage Jamaica and to an extent the Jamaica Historical Society, where we both serve on the board or on the executive board. So thank you, Marcia, for joining us. And last but not least, we have Mr. Siobhan Campbell. Siobhan is an accomplished architectural consultant with nearly 20 years of experience shaping office, residential, medical, and heritage projects, currently serving as Senior Heritage Officer at the Jamaica National Heritage Trust. Siobhan has been instrumental in drafting preservation schemes, guiding UNESCO-related initiatives, and overseeing heritage-sensitive projects across the island. With a strong background in construction management and architectural technology, Siobhan combines technical expertise in computer-aided designs and site management with a passion for safeguarding cultural heritage. His leadership roles at the GNHT included acting project director and manager of technical operations, reflect a proven ability to engage stakeholders, manage budgets, and deliver projects that balance innovation with conservation. Siobhan's career is marked by a commitment to sustainable development, community empowerment, and the preservation of Jamaica's rich cultural legacy. Thank you, Siobhan. Okay, so today we will be having hopefully a very engaging discussion. Hopefully there's a lot that can be learned from this particular discussion. The format for this panel, I know we started late, but there are some, just to give you a sense of the structure of the discussion, we will have each panelist to give their own opening remarks. I will then ask a targeted question based on their area of expertise. And then I will have two general questions where I will play the devil's advocate with one of those. All right? So I turn over to Dr. Green for your opening remark.
Thank you so much, Dr. Watts. And thank you very much, University of the West Indies and the History Department of History and Geology and Archaeology for inviting me. I just want to say this is an honor. And the whole discussion about Hurricane Melissa is very timely. And although we looked at it last year in October, it's still a current and relevant discussion today. So I commend you for doing this topic. One of the key things, and as I have traveled across Jamaica, we have seen so much about destruction. And I would like to emphasize here that one of the key things that I look out for continuously are those structures which were not destroyed. I think it is very, very important for us to begin to acknowledge that there were some buildings and some communities and some environments which were along the pathway of the hurricane, but they withstood the hurricane. And that's where the lessons, I believe, are to be learned. That's a very important focus, because in my historical research, etc., I have found that Jamaica over the years has developed a resilient architecture, and a resilient landscape practice. And what I am finding today is that there is construction and other things taking place which is defying this resilience. Now we know that a number of churches which have withstood hurricanes and earthquake went. But I want to say that when I look at it with my architectural eyes, and Mr. Campbell is here, he might even add, I noticed that a lot of them had chichi, timber, and things like that which were gone. And so the first gush of wind or whatever, some of these churches have actually said to me, you know, Miss, we were thinking of fixing your roof, you know, and then hurricane come. So, you know, we have to recognize those things. So, as a Jamaican historical legacy, we have developed a resilient architecture, and that exists, and it is important for us to analyze that so we can develop some going forward from the lessons learned. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, everybody. And it's my pleasure having you here. You know, as a cultural resource practitioner, my observation is that there's been a big gap where the maintenance of these physical buildings are concerned. However, I believe that we are indeed dedicated and committed people, and I think that my experience on the ground has proven that we will want to honor that what existed in Black River and other areas. There are some buildings that were not formally protected under the National Heritage Trust Act. However, they had some interest, whether from the historical construction methodology or some associated with somebody who might have been important in our history. And I believe that we want to honor those type of legacies. And so I think that we can definitely galvanize our efforts. I see a wide spectrum of persons who are sitting right here on the panel, and we can galvanize those efforts and work together to achieve a consensus. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lee, let's go. So we have Dr. Atkinson Swaby.
Good afternoon. All right. Well, firstly, hurricane is where we get the term hurricane from. It's a Taino word, and actually it is a name associated with their supreme deity, Yukahu. And hurricanes are manifestations in Nzango. So depictions of the hurricane in terms of the eye of the storm are pretty common in Taino cultural expression. So our relationships with disasters has been a part of our experience for centuries. And we tend to focus on disasters as being destructive and disruptive, but that disasters can also be creative. And our attitudes to disasters are also a reflection of our culture. A famous example is the underwater city of Port Royal, which was created from a horrible disaster. And we were lucky that it became a World Heritage Site because of those unfortunate circumstances. So that is one way in which, there is that, unfortunate, but still a good opportunity from a disaster. I find, and I was traumatized by Hurricane Gilbert, so I took Melissa very seriously. But I find us Jamaicans, we tend to not take these disasters that seriously. And the sad thing is that the Ministry of Culture had led a development of a national strategy and action plan for disaster resilience for the cultural sector. That's a document that I worked on with members of the public and private sector. And we had completed it by the March, and then by October, Melissa happened. Before even all the action plans were even, the first stages were even implemented. So I understand why we weren't as prepared as we should be. You would have thought that with Gilbert, we would have learned these lessons. But so many of our public and private areas, they struggle with enough resources for maintenance of these built heritage sites. And I mean, a simple thing like roofing. Roofing is so expensive, and we don't have the support that is needed. And most people have this sentiment that when it's old, it shouldn't be saved. And that is unfortunately a sentiment of the younger generation. And I don't want to take up too much time, but I really want to emphasize this. This panel started as a reaction to a video, a social media clip of a young woman talking about the destruction in Black River and blaming the presence of the heritage buildings as the root of this devastation in Black River. And a lot of people, whether we agree with her sentiments or not, a lot of people in this country have that attitude. And of course, my colleague, Dr. Watts, is highly controversial and he loves this. So he thought this was a perfect opportunity to engage with different members to see what really are people's perceptions. Is it that we should do away with these structures? Do they have a purpose? Are there ties only to the colonial heritage? And if it's only to the colonial heritage, does that justify them being destroyed? Should we channel our energies in other directions and construct newer buildings and so forth? So, yes, so it started in controversy, and I'm hoping that we will have a more meaningful interaction. That's from me.
Thank you, Dr. Atkinson Swaby. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you very much, Dr. Watt. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to say thank you very much for having me here, being a part of this discussion. I am very much excited about the discussion in regards to how we look at what Melissa, the passing of Melissa did to our island and the West in particular. I have not gone to the site physically, but I've been in a part of discussion. I've been following the news reports, sitting in discussion with my colleagues who would have gone on site and come back and explain to us what has happened to the site, what is happening and what continues to happen. And that paints a whole new picture in my mind as to what has happened to Jamaica. And I want to agree with Dr. Pat Green in her stance on how we should treat with our heritage, how we should treat with our built heritage. All right? And for me, I have a passion for the built environment, for historic building on a whole. And when I heard what Dr. Leslie made mention a while ago regarding the clip of young lady blaming historic buildings for the disaster, the devastation that took place in Black River. I object to that because history is time, and if we don't have our history, it is difficult for us to tell and know where we are coming from, where we are going. And if we are to do away with historical buildings, what we have now, where we are sitting, standing, will become history. What do we do with the building? Do we immediately destroy to build again? I don't agree. We have to learn to protect maintain and sustain what we have for our future generation and for history to continue. We cannot distance or separate ourselves from history. It is a part of who we are. It is what makes us. All right? So we need to come together and maintain and protect what we consider and what we have as history. All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Last but not least, Thomas.
Thank you very much, and thank you for including the Jamaica. Oh, and thank you very much, and thank you for including the Jamaica Historical Society and Built Heritage Jamaica in the discussions. And I'll speak to the notes that I prepared, and which in a way covers or probably pulls together some of what has been said by the other panelists. Traveling around, and I titled what I prepared, Disinterest and Neglect Aided Hurricane Melissa's Destruction of Heritage Buildings. Traveling around Kingston and St. Andrew and through other parishes, what strikes me is how ramshackle and chaotic built-up areas are. I'm going to make reference to an article which was in the Gleaner on Independence Day last year on the tragedy of Kingston, and spoke to the awful state of buildings in downtown Kingston. And the buildings, no matter their age, show neglect and poor maintenance. And this does not only apply to buildings which are old, pre-independence, but also to post-independence buildings. And I think we're very fortunate that Melissa didn't take a track through Kingston. Here I want to refer as a post-independence building to the International Conference Center downtown, which I had the privilege of touring when it was first opened in about 1984. And it was a magnificent building. I happened to attend a conference there just a few years ago, and it was a tragedy what had become of the International Conference Center due to poor maintenance. There is also a lack of interest in Jamaica's historic sites. Pre-independence sites are considered in our 21st century to be attached to colonialism and slavery and are reminders of evil and oppression. The architectural beauty and unique design of historic buildings are not appreciated by many, and the fact that they were actually built by enslaved people. Downtown, a building which we have, is our Parliament building. And I will tell you that I found it an absolute embarrassment to visit Gordon House, especially when I looked at buildings in the other Caribbean islands, Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana, which were built in the 19th century, some of them, and the way they are kept and the way they are appreciated by the people. The value of heritage is not seen, and the value of heritage tourism is not appreciated. History is not seen as a useful subject, in spite of quotes which are repeated by Marcus Garvey. And in fact, a visit to Marcus Garvey's boyhood home was, you know, it's in a terrible state of disrepair. The lack of interest brings neglect, abandonment, poor maintenance, and it makes buildings fragile and susceptible to damage and destruction in natural disasters. I think I heard on the radio that there is a report which identified poor maintenance as a contributing factor
to Melissa's destruction. Historic buildings which are in a fair state of maintenance tend to be in private ownership or they're occupied. Such buildings in government ownership, even when occupied, are poorly maintained. Vale Royal in Kingston, a good example. And heritage sites in the ownership of the government are in very poor shape. Highgate House and others. And I will just go on to mentioning the other thing that was mentioned also is poor building techniques and practices. Again, as said by Dr. Green, I was told by a couple of churches that they had just fixed the roof and the roof came off during Melissa. I will mention 2 workshops which I've attended, and I think one was mentioned, was the workshop organized by the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports to develop a strategy for building resilience to protect heritage buildings. This was a workshop on the national strategy on heritage disasters and climate change. I gather it is complete, and I think we were just told that it is complete, but it is to be approved and to be implemented. And clearly this will be a major task to identify the weaknesses in buildings and to actually take the necessary measures. The next workshop which I attended recently, just last week, was the workshop on the candidate sites for placement on Jamaica's tentative list of UNESCO heritage sites. The criteria for cultural and historic sites include integrity, authenticity, protection, and management. Jamaica's potential historic sites would fail on every one of these. And I rest at this point. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marcia, or Ms. Thomas, as I should say. So I will just quickly turn to our panelists. I have a few targeted questions for each of our panelists here today. So I'll just start with Dr. Green, following up from what Marcia just said, or what she was discussing about the poor quality of some of our historic buildings, or the poor state of our historic buildings. So you are a staunch proponent of the many lessons we can learn from our built heritage, dating back to the time of the Tainos. So what I would like to ask is if you could just give our audience some insight into some of the lessons that we can learn about preservation or conservation of these particular buildings. So what have these buildings taught us in architectural terms about, what have they taught us about as Jamaicans? What have they taught us about how we can continue to remain resilient, and what have we lost?
Thank you. I think it's an excellent question. And I'm glad you asked me because I can't wait to talk and take up the whole time. The point is that historically, we have had hurricanes and earthquakes, and a resilient building exists in our environment. And what needs to happen is that we need to go and do research and analysis, and I'm speaking in the context of the University of the West Indies, and today it's Research Day. There are a number of things and statements being made about wooden buildings, and that they're bad and they're weak, and those are the ones that were destroyed. But the construction of many of the buildings have been erected outside of resilient techniques that we as Caribbean people have developed. And I recognize that, we had enslaved people who were building, but we also had enslaved people who designed buildings and who designed techniques that mitigated earthquakes and hurricane. Example, look at this roof here. this is an example, you know, it's expensive. The roof is usually the most expensive part of your construction. But if you do mathematics, geometry, you recognize that 60-degree, 30-degree, 45-degree slope is excellent to mitigate. You have equal pressures when a hurricane comes. There are certain types of windows that we should be using which will allow the pressure to leave and which will allow movement of air when it's hot and so on. And also during the hurricanes, you allow things to happen. So there are construction techniques such as the shape of the roof, the type of the wall, how you brace a building, whether it is out of timber or concrete, how far down you put your foundations in the ground. Many of the buildings we saw being destroyed were cotched up on some kind of thing, you can go down in the foundation, and so on. Some of the churches we saw that came under, we're dealing with more intense, they lack any kind of cross bracing. Even if it's stone or brick, you would develop a technique, and that exists in our historic architecture. So we need to look at that. Even more important, one of the things that when you read the history books, they spoke about putting trees around the buildings and the trees that existed to become windbreakers. I hear people with saws and electric saws and machetes going out before the hurricane and knocking down the timber. So there are traditional techniques and practices that we need to go back to. One of my, a young man who is at the Caribbean School of Architecture from Hanover, I was hoping he'd be here today. His father is a carpenter in Hanover. He said, Miss, my father's house stand up, in the hurricane and all the other buildings fall down. He said even a tree fell on the house and the house didn't get destroyed because there are techniques. Some of the block buildings were destroyed. So if you do not know how to lay the blocks and how to put the windows in and how to operate, my grandmother told me, you open the window on the leeward side, which is the side the breeze is not coming from, and you close the one on the windward. When the eye of the earthquake of the hurricane changes, you reverse the window opening. Those are techniques and practices, and we have removed from them. Don't lock up yourself in the house. Some of the windows that we're putting on our architecture should not be allowed if we're talking about resilience and we're talking about natural environments. Thank you. I'll stop here. I'm available for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll transition to Mr. Blake. So you have a lot of hands-on experience through the GNHT and so on. So could you just give us a sense of what the experience is on the ground, in areas, especially areas that were devastated by Melissa, especially in areas like Black River and Westmoreland and so forth. And Trelawny.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Moderator. So my experience is as recent as yesterday. A team was down there conducting salvaging a salvaging exercise. Essentially, we're trying to retrieve bricks and wooden members that might be reused in other reconstruction exercises across the island. I know that there's a focus on Black River, perhaps because of a concentration of buildings that were destroyed. And as you rightfully said, there are some buildings in Westmoreland that also received damage. One that comes to mind is Timbuktu Great House, which is a great cave in Westmoreland. I know actively that the proprietors of that building, I think it's a trust that is set up, are seeking to reconstruct as soon as possible. They suffered great damage to the roof. There's 3 buildings there and all buildings suffered damage to the roof. But if you permit me, I want to add to what Dr. Green said. And to speak it a little bit, it's not that we are departing from these traditional building technology practices. I don't think it is widespread. Right? Okay, especially with the modern type of architecture, I think they're thinking about cost-saving measures. But one of the things that I've noticed with historical construction of the construction of these historical buildings that is oftentimes along the line of cemetery. So if we have a window on the east elevation, also replicate that on the west elevation. And perhaps what we really need to do, Dr. Pat, as you rightfully said, as what I got from your presentation just now, is to go back to those things. People know, like especially the older person, to know these things, but it's not being passed on, whether through oral history or in a policy document. I'm aware that there's a housing policy. I know it has been drafted. I have not read it since it has been completed, but perhaps now is the time for us to revisit these things and put these things in place. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blake. So I turn to you now, Dr. Atkinson Swaby. So you are our representative, as we're colleagues, so you are the rep for the department here on this panel. So I'd just like you to tell us some more about what role do you think the department, and by extension, the University of the West Indies can play regarding these issues of the impact of Hurricane Melissa on our built heritage.
Well, I think we started, the university was, of course, they had various projects, UWI Cares, to help not just our students that were impacted and staff that were impacted, but also communities. This panel itself is a start. We've talked about having other panels, trying to look at changing people's mindset about our archaeological and historical resources, and trying to change some of the narrative and the negatives that may be associated with them. I know one of the things I do with my students, because I find that students, they navigate this space, but they don't see this space. This is a plantation site. UWI is constructed or established on the Mona and the Papine estate. They walk by the ruins and it means nothing. They walk by the Aki and the Mango walks and it means nothing. So for me personally, I do tours every semester with my students to allow an opportunity for them to see. And in our discussion about built heritage, it shouldn't be one outside of its role with natural heritage. I'm really for both natural and cultural heritage. They are both entwined and both equally important to us in terms of our human experience. But also our concept of built heritage is not just structures, it's also infrastructure, right? In terms of our just the aqueduct itself, it's a beautiful monument. But these are things that we take for granted. And I understand the issue with the power dynamics associated with our colonial past, but as many of us on the panel have said, that these structures were built by enslaved Africans, and it is a testimony of their artisan skills. It is a testament of their brilliance, and it should be celebrated also. And I think that as a university, of course, your fundamental role is teaching and education. It's also advocacy, right? It is also community, right? And it is also research. And with regards to conservation, in terms of ensuring that they survive, we need to think about maybe we really should have a conservation code. It's on the books anyway, but I'm just throwing this out. It's on the books anyway. But, conservation of not just portable resources that people think archaeologists only care about, but also in situ resources. And studying the material culture, studying the methodologies, studying the cultural values associated with them, the interpretation, and of course their protection. But nothing is isolated without manpower, money, and legislation. And that's a hard pill in Jamaica. You have very few people who are interested in history and heritage. They don't see it as viable. I tell my students every class we need conservators. I beg you do. It doesn't matter what type, nobody's interested. Nobody's interested in being an archaeologist, you know. Very few are interested in being historians. I have one over there that I am working on. The rest of the department is working on to be, you know, he's our future. But the truth of the matter is they're not interested, you know. And we need to change that. We need to change the mindset that people see that history is living. And your history don't have to be nice. It doesn't have to be pretty. It's what makes you, you. It's a part of our identity. There's nothing wrong with it. You understand? It is what it is. And we must celebrate it, the good, bad, and the ugly. We must celebrate it, and there's no reason to be ashamed. There's a shame. I don't understand it. I am 6 generations removed from slavery. I am not ashamed. Why are people ashamed? This is a testament to resilience. You know? Yesterday, what did the UN pass? What did they pass? A historic day. They passed, right, stating that the enslavement of African, the transatlantic trade, was one of the gravest acts in humanity. 123 nations approved it. 52 abstained, 3 against, but 123, right? And they weren't just African countries, right? There were Asian countries too, you know? That, you know, what is there to be ashamed about? We need to change that mindset. And people need to realize that history is living. Our tourism industry is based off our heritage, our natural heritage and our cultural heritage. So why aren't we protecting our sites? Why aren't we protecting our resources? What would we have to show to the tourists? You know, there are a lot of changes that need to take place. And I think UWI is a good place to start. All right?
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Akinsi Swaby. I'm not sure why Okin is that far out. The future at the back. Interesting. All right. So, Mr. Campbell, I turn to you now. You are currently the acting project director of the JNHT, right?
No. No longer acting.
You are officially the
senior.
No. Oh, sorry. You
I've
were though.
Yes, I was working as the project director, the project department.
Right. So I just wanted to give us a sense of some of the administrative and the technical issues you've encountered. I know you said you weren't on the ground, but I know you'd have encountered some administrative and technical difficulties or challenges that hopefully you'd like to share with us.
All right. Thank you very much again, Dr. Wada. Thank you for the question. Before I answer the question, I want to go to Ms. Thomas' final script on the OUV that she made mention of in her script on our heritage sites. We currently have 2 World Heritage Sites, and our recent one is the Port Royal inscription. All right, and both sites, they are inscribed on the World Heritage Site because of their OUV, their outstanding universal value. And if we are saying histories of the past, it is not necessary. We should maintain, we should keep up with. We cannot or should not look forward for another World Heritage Site, because we would not be maintaining the site's outstanding universal value. If we take those away, we cannot look forward to another World Heritage Site. All right? In regards to the administrative aspect of the trust and its and the passing of Melissa, it is also mentioned in Ms. Thomas' script. It goes without saying, we are stretched, as Mr. Blake mentioned earlier, that a team was out yesterday, the day before. They have been out since Monday, and it is stretching the team to be out every single day, and we have other responsibilities to do. to carry out, and there are other sites that we need to give attention to. So, on the administrative side of it, we are being stretched, but we still have to do. But the do we are doing is not enough because we don't have the manpower, not only the manpower, but the resource on the financial side of it. We readily don't have that to give and to pump into the rebuilding of Black River. And that has been the case where JNHC is concerned. We're lacking in that area. But other than that, we try to do all that we can within our powers to give attention to the affected sites and areas.
Okay, Ms. Thomas, Marcio, I just wonder if you could just tell us generally about the role of built heritage and, you know, what role has the society or that organization what role has it been playing in terms of how we, you know, navigate this crisis?
First of all, I wish to make a reference to a point made by Dr. Green when she spoke about opening the window on the leeward or windward side, depending. I said this to someone. That is a practice I do because my parents used to do that, and they said to me that that is not science. Well, it works for me. I'll say that. And the university campus, I just want to say that I enjoy sites like the University of the West Indies and Shortwood Teachers College and others that are built on plantations and still have some of the plantation buildings. And in fact, some of our schools started in plantation buildings. And it gives you a sense of the past and the present. Tells you where we are coming from, where we are, and where we can go by the fact that these are educational institutions. Built Heritage Jamaica was formerly the Georgian Society of Jamaica, founded in 1967 with the objective of restoring Falmouth as one of the only remaining Georgian towns in, I think it is the hemisphere. I believe it's the hemisphere. That it was founded. The name was changed recently to Built Heritage Jamaica, and we are linked with a group which is in England, now called Jamaica Heritage Renewal, which used to be called Friends of the Georgian Society. And we have tried to, through our membership, to keep an interest in the conservation, preservation of historic buildings in Jamaica. At first we were focused on the Georgian period, which is related to the period of slavery. And we have extended it to be a little more than the period of slavery. It's the reason I could mention the conference center and our parliament building. We, like many civil society organizations, are having a very difficult time in terms of membership, in terms of financing. We try to continue advocacy. We try to engage in terms of visiting sites and so on. But we have to be realistic. We do not have the resources to help with the kind of restoration that would be needed. And we also have to remember that many of the buildings we are talking about have owners. The churches are owned by the various church denominations. The Anglican Church had most of the damage to churches. We had the privilege recently of, at one of our members' meetings, of having as our guest speaker Bishop Leon Golding, who is now the head of the Anglican Church in Jamaica and Cayman. And we were able to have an exchange with him. But I think we have to realize and, be realistic. The damage is so great for the churches that they have not had time to do a proper assessment of what is completely gone and what can be maintained and so on. I think their focus has been on the people who are the real church and how they can assist. Because we have to remember, church is actually not necessarily a building, church is people. And you need people to restore the building. That's how church buildings were restored in the past when the roof went or something. They had fundraising and all of that. So we as Built Heritage, we are not in a position to do some of these things. We are trying to do as much as we can in small ways. By probably being able to give a donation here and there or to do some kind of advocacy work. So that's as much as I would say about that.
Okay, Dr. Green would like to respond to something you said.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to say that Falmouth belongs to me. And my grandfather came from Barbados in the 1907 earthquake when Jamaica had a lot of destruction. And he was a master builder in Barbados. And the government of Barbados sent him to Falmouth. And he's buried there now. And he rebuilt the town. So sometimes we, in our enthusiasm, begin to label our architecture and give the wrong impression to the next generation that it belongs to somebody else from some other time and other period, when it really is FHE heritage. I really, really want to emphasize this because my father went to school in Falmouth. He told me the stories, and I drive through saying, that's my grandfather's building, my grandfather's building, my grandfather's building. It's very important for the next generation to understand that. What we also need, and we're in the university, is some scientific analysis, because everyone is saying that's folklore and fairy tale. We need the simulations with the computer. We have AI that can help us to show what happens when there is a hurricane, and if you put the window here, and if you use this type of windows, this young man here can take it on as a project. That's what we need to be doing, research daily. And I'm saying to you, let us begin to look at this heritage, claim it as FHE, it's mine, Falmouth belongs to me. I was the community architect in Falmouth, and I worked with the people. I found the carpenters, and I showed them how to do restoration. I want to commend the Commonwealth Heritage Forum, who gave a small grant, and a number of us are going to go out and do some salvaging and work alongside with the National Trust and others to begin to help them to identify structures that can be salvaged, some that need to be restored, and others where, and work with the community. And even more important, we are looking, if there's anybody at the university listening who wants to come and talk with me, we're looking for young people, because I, Pat Green, want to train some young people to do what I do. And I want you to be involved. I want you to talk like me, think like me, and say the building belongs to me, a FHE. Come and see me. We're looking for young people to go out in the training exercise, and we're trying to get some additional funds to begin to do salvaging and train a cadre of young people who can look at these and work and think history as ours and look at the resilience of our architecture. I have a photograph here, you may come and see. It's a building in St. Elizabeth, one of our traditional buildings. The hurricane tore down everything, it is still standing. It's a wooden building. So I am saying that what we have as our architectural heritage and our landscape, and we have all our persons speaking about, especially Dr. Swaby, talking about the resilience of the landscape. Don't build a building on the sand. The Bible says don't do that. Right? Put your building in, don't build it on the swamp. It's water. But if you put it in a certain position, we can help you and guide you. That's one of the things I get trained as architect. The first thing, This is where you site your building. No, don't put it there, don't put it there, put it here. And there are people with knowledge in this country who can help. And we want to pass on the skills. So I am taking this opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to do so, to invite every single young person listening to me right now, even when you're wearing a school uniform from the country. Come and talk to me. We're going to be training you over the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. We'll soon have question and answer session shortly after this. So we just have to follow up with just 2 more general questions for the panelists. They can chip in whether or not, depending on whether or not they have views on the matter. So it was hinted at in the beginning by Dr. Swewe about one of the reasons why we decided to have this panel in the first place. A lady in Black River, she gained some notoriety through social media by making the case that she doesn't see it as FHE heritage. She was actually blaming the presence of the historic buildings for the destruction that was wrought in Black River, right? So for her, what is the sense in terms of preserving this kind of heritage? I have also heard that argument in relation to the Mandeville courthouse that burnt down recently, a couple years ago, sorry. And the individuals say a long time that burned down, Babylon system, oppression, it's oppression based. So to what views do our panelists have on that perspective? Many people see these sites as the domain of the elite. It is not seen as relevant to the everyday discourse of our society and stuff like that. They feel that it's just the talk of academics and so on. What do you have to say about that? I can start with you, Dr.
I thought I answered that. It's part of our education. We need to educate and inform people that it's FHE building. It's FHE heritage, it's FHE architecture. And that's what we need. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. On the campus. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you again. So, I listened very carefully. I heard Dr. at Kingston say a lot of people are not interested, and I think it's a matter of education, as Dr. Pat Green. I'm sounding like a scratch record now, but the fact of the matter is, when I think about the business of heritage preservation, I think about strategy and I think about management, and if there is no top-down approach to the strategy of managing heritage sites, then it will look like there are big gaps. And perhaps there are big gaps because for the young lady to say that she probably represents a majority of the views in Dark River. However, I can say, being on the ground yesterday, speaking to the chief engineer, as they call him now, traditionally it was Rosenberg superintendent, he said, we could have gone ahead and hit down the building, but we decided to bring you in and we're going to wait until you do your work. So there are gaps, as I said. However, I don't think all hope is lost. It's just that there needs to be strategy for the management of these sites, whether through policy or legislation. What happened in Dark River and other areas, Falmouth, Westmoreland, is new. I was born post Gilbert. No, actually before, but I was small. so
You're like one.
right. So for the generation now, like this is a young lady, she will not have experienced Gilbert. So what we need to do, like what happened with the 1907 earthquake, is put things in place for whether building regulations or standards, and not just start, but do it. Do it as Dr. Palgrina said. Do it. Be underground with the artisans and pass on the knowledge. Yes.
Dr. Swim.
Okay, so that interview, 2 things came to mind. One, we talked about education. I don't mean formal education. I think informal education is much more influential than formal education systems. It's something that we take for granted. How we're raised in our communities, what we're exposed to. And what I realized is that she didn't know anything about her town. And it was so sad because last summer, the summer before, it was last summer. We had a few schools in Westmoreland and we did the Black River Town Tour, the Way Back When tour with Alison Morris. And she's a staunch member of the parish church in Black River, and she gave us an excellent tour. And I thought about everything that I learned on that tour and how much, I've been in heritage a long time, so I love spaces like Black River. So I didn't really need much convincing, but I just thought about how many people who probably don't realize about the little gems and treasures that exist in their homes that they take for granted. And it's also something I learned in my past life at the Trust, that when you go into many of these communities, a lot of them really don't know. But when you have these stakeholder opportunities and you demonstrate and show the importance of this resource, you can't find any beryllium tank and guards that can guard these resources better than these people in their communities. And a lot of time it is lack of proper public education, community education. And I think entities, Hush Trust, the JNHT, Institute of Jamaica, and even us at the UWI and other of our civil organization groups and interest groups, we need to make more efforts in our public education campaign. But the truth of the matter is that we can have these things, but people still don't come. But you cannot say that we didn't try. All right, the next thing is that we need to realistically think about what means that we can put in place in terms of structures and strategies to support many of these spaces in terms of their maintenance. Someone touched earlier about the inability of many people, private owners especially. A lot of them are owned by churches, and the churches have challenges just even fixing the roofs. I remember many moons ago at the Alley Church in Southern Clarendon, they couldn't afford to redo the roof with slates, which was the original roof, so they ended up having to, I think they changed it to wooden shingles because that is what they could afford. We need to really put some money where our mouths are, and if we don't have the money, find those who can help us get the funding to help them, because that's what we really need. Because all of these things that we need to secure so it doesn't cause destruction to property when we have these disasters, it doesn't cause damage to human and loss. We really need the financing. So we need to, let's not just talk theoretically, but what's existing now. Not to create, what is existing now that we can tap in and get some serious money to help. So I don't know if the JNHT, because one criticism of the JNHT and why people don't want to have their properties declared and designated is that there's no funding for technical support. The JNHT and other specialists like Dr. Green can provide technical expertise, but you have to pay Dr. Green. Dr. Green have to eat. You understand me? So, and specialties cost money. And the fact is that these things don't exist. So if some sort of culture fund can be created and everybody puts something to it that these entities can benefit from, I think that can really, really help.
All right, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you very much again. I sat here and I realized that we have come up with a solution to the problems that we're talking about. We just discovered what we can do to solve the problem we're having with our historic buildings and the different historic districts across the island. And those back that financial resources, policies, maintenance, and the list goes on. All we need to do is to put all of those together and get some money, all right? Because the little bit of money can't do that, all right? But I want to bring our attention to there's normally this motor vehicle show that takes place in Jamaica And when you go to that show, you would see some vehicles that are old. Yeah, 30, 40, 50 years old. And you wonder how those cars reach the show. Still can drive, still movable. Why? Maintenance. Funds were injected into the maintenance and the keeping up of these vehicles. What's the difference between the vehicles and our buildings? And the issue lies with what we just spoke about. Interest, financial resources, maintenance, and all of these things are what we need to maintain and allow our history to remain a part of it. Just like these vehicles. You go to shows every year and you see these vehicles on display, driving, seeing where we might be on the road and we see some of them driving past us. They are being maintained. And that's the difference between these historic vintage cars as opposed to our historic buildings. We need to put policies and put money where our mouth is. Thank you.
Okay, so we are kind of short on time, but Marcel, I'll allow you to respond to the issue.
I just want to pick up on a point that was made by Dr. Atusi Slaby when she said that it is false to think that other people had a very good history and we had a very bad one. Well, the reality is everybody had a very bad history. Something called human rights and respect for humanity is a late 20th century concept. It didn't exist before, and therefore nobody had a very good history. So if you go to Rome, you will see the buildings from the various periods in Rome. And one of them is the Colosseum. And if you want to talk about evil, you have to hear the history of the Roman Colosseum. And it still stands today, and it attracts thousands, if not millions, of visitors. And we will go to other countries and visit their sites where a whole host of atrocities happen. The Tower of London and other places. So why can't we appreciate our places, which, as Dr. Green says, they are ours, they belong to us, they shaped us, they made us who we are. We went through all the trials and tribulations, and we survived, and we are not victims. And this is perhaps one of the thinking of reparations, that it has left this feeling, and you know I'm a master on some of these issues, that it left this feeling of victim of the time. I must just quickly mention Ireland. I did not realize that Ireland had been a colony of Britain for 800 years until I visited Dublin. And I saw a documentary recently on how Dublin how Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, has preserved its historic sites. And their history was not pretty. And they had to actually take up arms and fight a war in the early 1920s to gain their independence from Britain. And they maintain their heritage sites. And they are a big tourist attraction, not for both people in Ireland as well as visitors to Ireland. So I think we have to begin to see our sites in that way, that they mean something to us, they have value, and that they can be woven into our tourism product as well as be there for us. There is something called heritage tourism. Most of us, when we travel to see the history of the place. They don't necessarily travel just to go to sit on the beach. People want to see other things. They want to learn. They want to know what your history was. And I don't think we should be ashamed to say what that history was.
Okay. All right. So just one more general question before we have the question and answer session. But I'll ask that these three of us, three of the panelists, to respond about the way forward. There was a recent pronouncement about moving Black River. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Moving it?
Yes,
Right. The Prime Minister. A new town.
Yes, I'd like to say the way forward is scientific analysis. We need to be generating a website or whatever. There's something called an urban atlas where we can begin to put documentation. I mean, today you can stay anywhere in the world and you can see the reconstruction of the Port Royal Underwater City. I mean, so we can do that. National Geographic did that. So we need to get that kind of information coming back in our shores. And we as a university, as a people, as a country, need to be using modern technology. And, you know, let's rebuild Black River and we can put it on our faces and walk around like that and have a wonderful experience.
Okay, thank you to the panelists, and I invite you to raise some issues with them afterwards. Okay, thank you.